Welcome back. Radio Siegfried Wagener, propaganda analyst, MBS KFEL Denver, Monday, April 6th, my birthday, 1942, 7:15 to 7:30 Mountain West Time, an analysis of propaganda by Siegfried Wagener. Good evening. Almost unnoticed among the military and strategic problems of the spring, the war of propaganda has reached a critical high point. So critical indeed is the propaganda war right now as it has probably not been before. The greatest issues are in the balance, because there was no radio and TV in the wars before that. There was radio, I'm sure, in the First World War. The greatest issues are in the balance, and before they come to pass in military form as attacks and retreats, victories and defeats, a good deal of them will already be decided by way of the mental attitude, that is, the morale of the people involved. What then is the grand strategy of propaganda? There is no ready-made answer, and there can only be probing, analyzing, and a good deal of guessing. But certain facts stand out like signposts at a complicated highway juncture. When dense fog is all about, and when the last passing car brushed the signpost and thrown them slightly out of kilter, let's see if we can make sense out of the signs. First, there's Great Britain's problem of India. It is much more of a problem of propaganda than generally realized. Like I always say, if you just turn off the TV set and turn off your computer, walk outside, nothing's going on. It is somewhere in the world, but it ain't here, and it isn't usually where the people live. It's filling our minds and changing the way we think. So, what the British radio says about India sounds all good and well. Britain's intentions and promises for India's future seem all right. Unfortunately, however, the people of India don't seem to care so much about the future as about the immediate present. Because everyone, like today, a lot of people don't have jobs and they're hungry and they need money. And the last thing they care about is what are we going to do 50 years from now? And unless tomorrow's proposition by the War Cabinet in London brings radical change, London has so far failed to show that it realizes the enormous propagandistic implications of its attitude towards India, not only in India itself, but in the entire world. What has happened these last 2 weeks has an adverse effect on large groups of the American public. It constituted propaganda of fact entirely undesirable in the war effort and relations of Great Britain and the United States. Whether or not the American critics of Britain's policy in India are right or wrong, the fact remains that sharp words are spoken about what commentators have freely called the Tory government in London. Happily, this criticism is not directed against the British people as such, because it is well known that the public and the press in England are censured their government even more than is done in this country. Happily, this criticism is not directed against the British people as such, because it is well known that the public and press in England are censuring their government even more than is done in this country. American criticism is therefore nothing that could endanger the unity of our two people, brothers Ephraim and Manasseh, in their effort to defeat the common menace of the Axis powers. But it is a sign which should be noted in Downing Street that there is an unwillingness here to jeopardize the victory of the world democracy and world freedom just because some people want to hold on to a super annotated privileges. The blue bloods, the aristocrats. However, what is of paramount importance in the political struggle for and against immediate Indian independence are the propagandistic repercussions among all the colored races of the world. I mean, Aryans are against white people, and Aryans are against Jews, the Nordic type of Aryan. So white people are fighting themselves, and then all the colored people are uniting, kind of, against us, is what he's talking about. But when the white people do what they're supposed to do, all the world unites. That's a deep statement, and I don't want to go any further with it. However, paramount importance is the political struggle for and against immediate Indian independence and the propagandic repercussions among all colored races of the world. These include those in China, in Russia, the Mohammedans of the Bay of Bengal to the Rock of Gibraltar, the Islamic people, and of our own Filipinos. To all of these billions of people in the political battle of India is a symbol to the real intentions of the democratic white nations in this war. It doesn't matter what the United Nations promise, and it doesn't matter what we sincerely and honestly intend to do after the war is over. In propaganda, as elsewhere, facts speak louder than words, and if we don't succeed in bringing the facts of India on our side, we cannot expect the colored races to believe us after their century-old fight against the white man's domination. There is no use in trying to hide this. If we did, we would only hand the Axis propaganda machine an argument on a silver platter. Already the propagandist gushers of Berlin, Rome, and Tokyo work with neck-breaking speed to exploit the haggling that goes on between London and New Delhi. As long as the situation is undecided, I don't think that the Axis, except in isolated cases in Burma, will succeed in converting the colored races to its cause. Because, they're the master race. Why would the colored people of the world go with them? It's logical. But if these subsequent facts should bear out the Axis propaganda, then it may achieve a success among the colored races the world over by far greater than anything Hitler or Hirohito could have achieved on the battlefield. But if subsequent facts should bear out the Axis propaganda, then it may achieve a success among the colored races the world over by far greater than anything Hitler or Hirohito achieved on the battlefield. Thus, the emphasis today, as so often in the past, again on propaganda. And in this battle of propaganda, it is always the wisest policy to look to the far, the wide, the future horizon of this world, rather than to glue the eyes on the narrow, immediate strip of ground on which we happen to stand at the moment. The entire German army must be walking in its sleep or suffer from incurable insomnia. The trouble with Hitler's boys is that the marrow of their bones turns to ice cream whenever the Russian guerrillas are mentioned. They don't dare sleep at all, if they are only a few hundred yards separated from the tightly packed main body of the troops. According to what Moscow says, the German prisoners say they are in a state of permanent panic, to be pinked by a bullet or to be blown to the moon by a bomb. Well, even Pretty Adolf said a few days ago that he liquidated several thousand Russian guerrillas from behind his lines. So there must be something to these everlasting stories about the heroism of the Russian guerrillas. But hearing them day after day here at Mutual KFEL listening posts has made me suspicious that Moscow radio is using these stories merely as a screen behind which is hidden something vitally important. Moscow radio has used that technique before. Just what it wants to camouflage now is hard to say. However, it might be well to remember that behind the insufferable baby be good stories which Moscow put on the air before Hitler started out to take the Moscow radio under his own management, there loomed an unprecedented and practically unknown fighting machine which happened to be the only one which stopped Hitler. The Wolverines in Russia. The guerrillas. I was at the time one of the very few who predicted such a fighting machine because, besides the bedtime stories, the Moscow radio also told exhaustively about Russia's preparation for the war. Today, no such clue is given. The Moscow propagandists have apparently learned the art of complete concealment, but by exercising that very art, they reveal almost the indisputable fact, namely that they are concealing something so vital that nothing is left undone to camouflage it. Hence, I do not hesitate to predict that some surprise is shaping up behind Moscow's airtight and apparently single-tracked propaganda. And judging by the past performance, it may be belated but happy Easter egg for the United Nations. April 6th is truly Restoration Day, 3 days after Passover, but I guess Easter that year was after April 6th. As regards to our own grand strategy of propaganda, I may say that President Roosevelt's dispatch of a negotiator to India is an indication. In a nutshell, our grand strategy is that we say what we mean and that we don't say what we don't mean. Yes? Remember, how about that, Obama? We do say what we mean and we don't say what we don't mean. Yes, there are clues. Yes, there are certain silences which might tell a tale, but today is Army Day, and in fairness and honor of our, but April 6th is Army Day. And in fairness and honor of our fighting boys, let me, as a propaganda analyst, say to the nation, keep your mouth shut about rumors. However, it is a matter of recurrent cheer to yours truly here among the pines and crags of the everlasting hills to hear the factual newscasts which our American shortwave stations are continuously broadcasting to the far east and Europe. No attempt is ever made to conceal our setbacks or to twist bad into good news. This is a sign of our strength, which none of the Axis shortwave stations, and particularly not Hirohito's own, has shown for some time. When Hitler was victorious in the lowlands, in France, and the Balkans, his propaganda ministry felt no qualms in admitting occasional reverses. But since he started marching to and from the Kremlin, Dr. Goebbels has felt no inclination to admit anything smacking of defeat. With the sons of the Jap winning all the initial battles, there wouldn't have been anything in the way of Jap broad blasting to admit an occasional loss. It would have added at least to some semblance of the veracity of their reports. Like saying both sides of the story gives you more credence that you can tell the truth. This policy of concealing all the bad news opens a wide vista into the actual weakness of the Axis. In propaganda, at least, it makes the United Nations look as strong as Hitler in his greatest triumphs, while on the other hand, the Axis propaganda takes the attitude, say, of the French after Dunkirk. This policy of concealing all the bad news opens a wide vista into the actual weakness of the Axis. In propaganda, at least, it makes the United Nations look as strong as Hitler in his greatest triumphs, while on the other hand, Axis propaganda takes the attitude, say, of the French after Dunkirk. And that is my analysis of propaganda for the present. The shortwave stations to which I have referenced were most of the transmitters from London, Moscow, Berlin, Rome, Tokyo, and of the United States of America. And now, from the very roof of America and from the foot of Long's Peak, I wish you a very pleasant good night. And that was April 6th. Amen.